Hello, my name is Bill Haley, and this is for Haley 2024, The Movement's Government Reform Ideas. Now, this video is going to be on the Parent Sector Board. Now, I am creating a whole new structure of government, radically reforming the government to a much more liberty-minded, more freedom, more liberty, more free enterprise, less government monopoly control over our lives. So I'm changing the foundations of government. So if this is the first video you watched, please go to my website, haley2024.org. Look over the foundations, look at some of the other videos, but this video is going to concentrate on the Parent Sector Board. Where it has power, where it does not have the power, and how that all works. So, this is the structure of government. We're going to split government into 30 sectors. So the top leaders and the people governing over education are different people than the people governing over police. Different people will be governing over environmental. We'll look at all that in a minute. But we're going to concentrate on the Parent Sector Board. Once we have all 30 sectors separated out, so we don't increase government power, we don't decrease government power, we separate government power into 30 sectors. Then we allow people to be governed out of one of roughly a dozen different governing agencies. They pick who they want to be governed by. I could choose who I want to be governed by. My neighbor gets to be choosing who they want to be governed by. They're called CRAs, Competitive Regulatory Agencies. They are competitive governing agencies, and they also send up representation when we need representation. And the Parent Sector Board is made up of representatives of each of the CRAs from all the 30 sectors. Let's go over it. So we have roughly 12 different competitive regulatory agencies under each government, under each sector. This is at the federal level, local level, and the state level, all three levels. So we keep all three levels. So you get to pick the one you want, my neighbor gets to pick the one they want, I get to choose the one I want. So we're governed separately. We live in the same society. Only a few things need to be governed at a monopolized way. So, for example, we need one commander-in-chief as a head guy directing our armies and our military. Other things need a few other things need monopolized. But so much of our governance does not need to be monopolized. We'll go over all the 30 sectors and we'll explain why. But we're going to try to stick on the Parent Sector Board on this video. So, the Parent Sector Board. The CRA Parent Sector Board is a governmental organization controlled by representatives of all the governed areas entities. So this is an actual clause in the Constitution. The Constitution has well over 500 clauses, about 13,000 words. So it's about 3 to 4 times bigger than the current Constitution, but there's reasons for that. I'm really trying to restrict down what government can do. Give government power only where it needs to have power, and hold back where it needs to hold back. So there's so many ways government's trying to come in and have more power. And I have a lot of clauses trying to take that back away. So the Parent Sector Board. So it's representatives of all the people from all the sectors. Members of the CRAs from all 30 sectors send representatives to make up the Parent Sector Board. So I'm a member of a CRA of all 30 sectors. So I pick each sector, I pick which CRA to join. Education, financial, insurance, police, military, what have you. Family law, everything. So every one of those CRAs will send up representatives to the Parent Sector Board. The members vote. CRAs and CRA representatives to the Parent Sector Board carry weighted votes equal to their CRA weight determined by their sector board divided by the number of sectors. So it's 30 sectors. So every sector sends up 1/30 of the representatives. Then within each sector, there's roughly a dozen different CRAs. So a CRA has a proportional. So if 10% of the people belong to CRA letter A, then they get 10% of the representation. Another CRA, let's say CRA letter B, has 6%. Then they send up 6. So it has between 5 and 20%. The CRAs have to be between 5% and 20%. So one might have 18%, one might have 7%, a dozen of them, but they equal 100%. So every CRA has a weighted vote. The CRA Parent Sector Board must have a legislative branch, executive branch, and a judicial branch. There's a lot to that. Every organization is a full governmental system with legislative, executive, and judicial. CRAs must proportionally send legislative representatives to create the CRA Parent Sector Board, legislative organization. A CRA's official representative may add their representative strength to an existing legislator. Because a Parent Sector Board does not do that much, they don't need 1,000, 100,000 people going up there, because there's going to be a lot of CRAs across all of America. So we don't need all those representatives up there. I mean, hundreds of thousands of them. We just don't need it. We split government into a lot of little areas. So we have diversified authority across everywhere. So two CRAs or dozens of CRAs with the like-minded views in different parts of the country or whatever, they can just add their representative strength to an existing legislator. Or they can set up their own legislator. They pay for them and everything. Members of a CRA must elect a top executive to the CRA Parent Sector Board. Now this is top executive. Everybody needs a top executive to execute what's going on. But this is not like the president. He doesn't have a lot of power. We're going to go over the powers of the Parent Sector Board in a little bit, which is not much. Local level sector board legislators may enter into agreements with other localities to share a Parent Sector Board top executive. So if you have a local government of, let's say, 10,000 people or even 1,000 people, 100,000 people, or 1,000,000 people, whatever it is, it might not be enough people to create your own chief executive. You just don't have that money. But there's going to be a lot of localities. You can share one. The job is not a big job. It's more of keeping the whole system working. I'm sorry. It's not keeping the whole system working. It's keeping the sectors separated. And that's the system I'm talking about. The sectors, I'm not going into other sectors' responsibilities and authorities, their jurisdiction. CRAs must proportionally send judicial officials to the Parent Sector Board. So all the CRAs send legislative, they vote on the top executive, and they send judicial. So if you have 7% of the 7% of the people at the federal level, let's say, you send up 7% of the legislators. You send up 7% of the judicial justices, or whatever you want to call them. And you get 7% of the vote to go to the executive. CRAs must proportionally staff all three branches of the Parent Sector Board. The Parent Sector Board is not going to have a large staff. They don't do that much. They're more of a constitutional, making sure the whole system stays within their system. All the sectors stay within their sector. It's not going to be a huge job. It's an important job. It's a constitutional type of job. But it's kind of like the Supreme Court. It's very different than their authorities. I'll get into their authorities. But it's kind of like that, where they don't need a huge staff, so it's not going to be very expensive. But you staff it up, and that way you get people from all the different philosophies of how people want to be governed. You get liberals, you get conservatives, you get libertarians, you get Green Party people, you get all the different people. CRAs must fund their representatives and staff. So you hire your people to send up there. You don't send them up there and then they'll tax everybody. No. Your CRA is where things happen. They charge you the fees. Then they have to pay for their staff to go up. Or maybe they'll share somebody up there already to share money to go up there because it's not a huge job. But the localities will have even a lesser of a job. The federal government will most likely be able to staff their own people, no problem. You won't do so much sharing on the federal level. State level, some states might. Okay, let's keep on going. The CRA Parent Sector Board defines parameters and responsibilities and authorities of all sectors. This is their job. That is almost exclusively their job. We'll go over a few clauses, what else they have to do, but this is the Parent Sector Board's job. They define the parameters and responsibilities and authorities. The parameters of responsibilities and authorities of all the sectors. That is their job. They don't get to control what happens in any of the sectors. They don't get to control the police. They don't get to control the courts. They don't get to control the education. They don't get to control the environmental. They just get to say, this part of the environmental law or education or police, they go into this sector or that sector. Where is that line separating insurance and financial law? So let's keep on going. The CRA Parent Sector Board must develop a mission statement for every sector. Now that sounds like it could give a lot of power to somebody. But the next clause is going to be very important. The sector's mission statement must be non-regulatory in nature. So we cannot go into a situation where the mission statement is 100,000 pages long and it goes into heavily regulated language. It's going to be on broad topics like the family law has to deal with elder care, has to deal with divorce, and has to deal with adoptions and stuff like that. It doesn't get to say how they have to deal with adoptions. That'll come in a different video. I'll talk about how that will work. But it has to deal with what's a mission statement, the broad topics. And just to make sure, in almost all my clauses, I have a way of defining or saying 40% of Parent Sector Board vote may curtail the scope or lower the regulatory nature. So I have a way of determining if this is going to get out of control or not. So this is the bottom clause of this, the 40%, stops it from being overly regulatory in nature. The Parent Sector Board may establish new, reconfigure, or consolidate sectors. It says may, and if you know anything about my structure, it takes 70% to do it. 70% of almost, at the sector board level or the Parent Sector Board level, those are the monopolized, governing everybody, rules to govern everybody. Almost everything that's done there needs a 70% vote of the representatives of the people. So it's hard to do. So we're not going to have monopolized government over much. There's a few things, we'll go over that. Maybe not in this video, but other videos. The responsibilities and authorities of the Parent Sector Board, with the exception of direct and precise clauses within this amendment, are limited to ensuring all sectors stay within their sector's jurisdiction and stay within the structure of this constitutional amendment. So this is kind of like Amendment 9 we currently have in our current U.S. Constitution. It says that you don't have the authority unless we say that you have the authority. Maybe it's not Amendment 9 and 10 probably. But it says the Parent Sector Board can only do what we're telling it to do. This is a clause just to say you do not have the power. This is not a general grant of power. The Parent Sector Board does not have a general grant of power, a governmental power. It cannot govern. It can only separate the sectors and say what sector has power. The Parent Sector Board's judicial branch has jurisdiction regarding CRAs or sector boards, taking action outside a sector's authority. So the jurisdiction of the judicial branch of this Parent Sector Board deals only with CRAs or sector boards taking actions outside the sector's authority. So once it goes outside of its authority, it can deal with it. Okay, Another thing is we don't want our Constitution to be a suicide pact. And it's been mentioned before, just in case something big happens, and this will probably never come into play, but if 65% of the, or the representatives of 65% of the people, American people, think there is just a huge problem, a major war going on, a major crisis, major something happening, 65% has to agree to go outside of the rules of this Constitution. It's not going to happen. I just want to have a clause in here just in case. But then I really restrict this back by saying that the vote has to occur every 30 days. And if it is not renewed, it goes back to normal. So this is just a safety clause. Just in case. I don't tend to, there's so many other ways to deal with major problems. A whole lot of other ways to deal with it. This Constitution is made to deal with big problems if they happen without having to go here. But just in case. Once this amendment passes, the current government and the Parent Sector Board have broad powers in a 5-year window to implement a transition plan consistent with moving towards the CRA structure. So there needs to be a transition. We're changing the foundations of the government tremendously. We cannot do it overnight. We cannot do it with a snap of the fingers. There needs to be a way for the military to go free market, police, education, going free market, roads, free market, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, going free market, going 100% away from government welfare, going to a charity system. There's no government control at the monopolized level where it's governing everybody. I'm sorry. Okay, let's keep on going. So you see how radically we're changing the foundations of government. But it's a very modest proposal because radical is government doing so much for us. Modest means government's modest. It has modest amount of powers. So we're trying to really restrict governmental power, or at least monopolize government power. Monopolize means over everybody within the jurisdiction of the either locality or the state or the federal government or all of America. So now within your chosen competitive governing agencies, CRAs, competitive regulatory agencies that govern, they regulate, they represent. There can be big government inside there, or it can be libertarian small government inside there. We'll get into that on other videos. The U.S. Constitution. Okay, we're gonna go through the Article 5 of the current Constitution to amend it. So we do it legally, we do it constitutionally. But that way of changing the Constitution is very, very easy to be done if somebody does it with strategy and with ill intent. 20% of the people live in the districts, state legislative districts needed to change the Constitution. If somebody wanted to use strategy and had ill intent, they can change the Constitution in very bad ways. We want to make sure this is going to be done and it's going to be much more secure. We want to secure our Constitution. So this is an amending part of the Constitution. The U.S. Constitution is amended by a 75% vote of all federal CRA Parent Sector Board representatives. Constitutional clauses are not subject to repeal or amendment with less than a 75% vote of all the federal CRA Parent Sector Board representatives. So almost all monopolized action can be repealed with a 40% vote. Not amendments can't. No. This is the Constitution. We need to protect it. Right now, 10% of the people in America can change the U.S. Constitution if they get into the right districts. It's very, very fraught with danger right now. A hostile country can take over our country, or a radical group, small fringe group, can take over our country constitutionally, and we need to stop that. The Federal Parent Sector Board must uniformly define an entity's income, per capita income, and the gross domestic product. among others needed definitions relating to clauses in this amendment. So I give the parent sector board, because if I put out a clause, and I do, for taxation for, let's say, 5% of the GDP has to be collected in sales tax to fund the military. It's a free enterprise military, but you get funded in a free enterprise way, but the money comes from the pile of sales tax, and we want to collect 5% of GDP. Same thing with some charity giving, because we get rid of welfare. Everybody's mandated to give 5% to their chosen charity. We'll get into that. And we need to have good definitions on GDP. And there's couple other issues in there, terms I used, and we want a good definition. We don't want that to be defined outside of this. I had to give a place where it was defined. So I don't leave it to chance. I don't leave it to the court to define that. There's other terms within the Constitution I leave to the judicial branch. And we'll get into that on another video. Okay, the Federal Parent Sector Board must okay, I did that one. I thought I changed it. The Parent Sector Board must distinctly create each of the sector board's bylaws in the Parent Sector Board bylaws. So bylaws are going to be very important. Bylaws talk about the separation between the executive, legislative, and judicial. They talk about voting. They talk about membership. They talk about fees. They talk about a lot of different things. We'll have a whole separate video on bylaws. But the Parent Sector Board must do it for the Sector Board and the Parent Sector Board. CRAs create their own bylaws. But this is one of the powers of the Parent Sector Board, is to create the bylaws. They're very constitutionally minded. So this is one of the very few things. So this is very distinct. Setting bylaws never authorizes that sector or that sector board authority. It just splits up authority and says how it's going to work within their sector board, legislative, judicial, and stuff like that, executive, and how the memberships are going to go. It doesn't give that sector board authority. The Federal Parent Sector Board has authority over the creation and reconfiguration of American states and territories with a 70% state Parent Sector Board vote from any affected state. So we don't let the Parent Sector Board just mess with a state unless the state really wants to. There's a lot dealing with that. I want to do a whole nother video on that. But the Parent Sector Board has some authority, but 70% vote. Again, this is not going to give the states more power or less power. It's going to allow more. It's dealing with whether you're a state or not a state, and we'll get to do that whole nother video. But it does bring the Parent Sector Board into it because that's the most representative body in the United States. It doesn't have a lot of power, but it's a check on some other stuff. So it doesn't have a lot of authority, but it has some checking authority. It checks some abuses. The State Parent Sector Board has authority over the creation and reconfiguration of local governments. Again, a whole nother video. The local government with a higher population than the least populated state may become a distinct American state with a 50% local Parent Sector Board vote. The respective state or federal Parent Sector Board may not block this action. Again, that's another video. It's way for really large states. New York City, LA, Chicago, some of the big cities, they're bigger than many of the states. Is that fair for them not to have representation in the federal government the same as New Hampshire, as Idaho, North Dakota, stuff like that? The Parent Sector Board may set temporary emergency taxes with a 70% vote to deal with significant negative externalities. A 40% vote repeals an emergency tax. Only when big things happen. 70% is not going to be easy to get to. And within the structure I have many, many, many other ways to deal with this. Insurance, rating floors. Get into those videos and you'll see that this is never going to come up. This is never going to be needed. But if something big happens, a huge flood, a major disaster, something major happens, then the parent sector board and everybody's going to have to agree on this. To get 70%, you're going to have massive agreement to do this. And then we'll talk about how that tax is going to have to be done, because I have clauses talking about that. All new debt by the sector boards or parent sector boards must be sold into an MCAT by well-defined future individualized share loans. That's not going to make sense if this is the first video. You need to know my monetary policy is dramatically different than what we currently have or anybody has out there. It's real money, backed up by real things of value. Future taxes, future income that you're going to make, already taxed as an asset instead of debt, or it is debt, but it's another way of having debt. So it changes the foundations of debt, taxes. We're going to have a whole nother video on debt and taxes. But the parent sector board and the sector boards are not going to have collect taxes. Those taxes go to that sector. And the CRAs collect that. It's going to go to the CRAs to do what needs to be done. And there's other ways to get that done within my structure that's going to really make that almost non-existent anyway. But 70% is going to be hard to get to regardless. And because it's so hard to get to, people are going to deal with it in the ways it's supposed to be dealt with. But that's a backup system just in case something huge happens. The rating system parent sector board is structured the same as the CRA parent sector board. You need to know the rating system side. We haven't talked about it yet, but the parent sector board, there's a rating agency side and a parent sector board side. They have a parent sector board for the rating system as well. Again, wait till I get to the rating system. I can't explain that on this video. But the rating system is a way to get quality information from a wide variety of perspectives by representatives of the people, with individuals choosing how they want ratings to happen. So you don't have the extreme power of information monopolize information. The Federal Rating System Sector Board must set a rating floor regarding the proper respect, cooperation, full faith, and credit between and within the CRA structures per narrowly drawn category. So rating floors are a rating you're not allowed to go below. So every rating agency gives different things ratings. And if you get too low, there could be a rating floor if it's a negative externality. And the CRAs have to increase their standards until they get above the rating floor. There's a lot of ways for that rating agencies to naturally bring up standards by people's decisions, buying decisions, purchasing decisions at the point of purchase because they see low ratings. We're not going to get into the rating system right now, but the rating floors, but we need to have all the CRA structures from every state, every locality, the federal government, between the CRAs within a sector and CRAs across sectors, education, a CRA dealing with the financial CRA, education CRA dealing with the police or law enforcement CRA for protection and different things like that. So you need to have good cooperation. And that's just to make society work and we don't become too separated. We want a full faith and credit clause within the Constitution. That's the same thing as a current full faith and credit clause, but you have to have cooperation between the CRAs, between any body, any organization, agency within the CRA structure, with any other CRA structure. We need to have cooperation. So this makes it not so it cannot go so low. The cooperation has to be there. Or you're not allowed to be a CRA. You have to be a CRA sector board has to cooperate. This is part of being a government. Part of being fulfilling your societal contract. The contract everybody signs to be in our country. And you have to do that under my Constitution. After the Constitution I'm proposing. The parent sector board of the federal, state, and local governments must take ownership of all government assets and liabilities as defined in the 5-year transition plan. Now, everything the current government owns, everything the federal government owns, everything a locality owns, everything state owns, the state governments, land, assets, school buildings, military, aircraft carriers, to police cars, to police stations, to colleges and universities. If they're public, they all must be sold to the private sector. Now, some can be sold to CRAs, but the Parent Sector Board has to take ownership during the transition and then start selling off the pieces. It's the way we're going to pay off some of the debt. So you have to look, I'm not going to go into that right now because this is not a debt video, it's a Parent Sector Board video. All current government-owned and controlled assets must be turned over in the Parent Sector Board within a 5-year transition and sold into the free enterprise system, or the free market. The inclusion of clauses within this amendment of significant government-owned property transitioning to free enterprise is to assure the reader of this amendment that those areas are covered by this clause. This clause is all-inclusive. So I could probably take out 20 different clauses saying, and this is going to be sold into the free enterprise system, and this is not going to be government-owned anymore, and this is not going to be government-owned anymore. From the education to the police to the Social Security to the roads, it all goes to the free enterprise system, to the free market system. I can probably take out 20 clauses and just replace it with a very short, all government-controlled owned assets and government-owned and controlled assets must be turned over to the Parent Sector Board and sold into the free market. I can leave it to that. Use the word all. But right now, I can probably take it out later, but right now, I want the reader to keep on understanding that, yes, aircraft carrier is going to be sold into the free enterprise system. A lot of controls. We'll have another video on that. Sorry. Every Parent Sector Board working through sector boards must implement a divesting plan of all government assets consistent with this standard transition. So I have a standard transition how we sell it into the free enterprise system. It's a pretty good system. Look at that video. Look at that clause. Look at my website. There's a lot to that. Again, this is the Parent Sector Board is going to have to implement some of this. So they're going to be constitutionally in nature, but for the first 10 years or so, they need to have some really good financial people to know how to sell off assets into the free enterprise system to get the most worth out of them. I have a dollar cost average way of doing it. There's a way to do it. Creating a corporation with stocks and selling off percentage of the corporation, selling off stocks and the like. But that's another video. The Parent Sector Board must address areas of significant concern arising from states not accepting specific sectors. So part of the Constitution I have is saying that if one of the states says, I want to go just with the military portion, foreign policy portion of this, but I want to keep everything else the way my current government is and not go to the structure. Well, a state can sign off on this amendment and keep some of their sectors the way it's currently done in their state. Their education, their police, their everything else. They don't have to go totally to this. It's one of the ways I want them to, but it's one of the ways that to get the votes necessary to make this amendment happen. So I'll leave that alone. I'll have another full video on just that alone right there. But if there's significant areas of concern arising from states not accepting all of it, then the Parent Sector Board can address some of those issues. And they must address it if it becomes a negative externality. And we'll discuss what a negative externality is. Obviously, you understand the term, but how I use it. But we'll discuss that in another video. The Parent Sector Board has the authority to add, reduce, or reconfigure the sector's number and nature. Kind of had that in another clause, but I think this is in a certain section in the Constitution that it was needed in that section. The state Parent Sector Boards. So I make clauses dealing with whether it's the state Parent Sector Board or the federal or the local. So I make distinctions within this Constitution. So it's the same Constitution for the federal, state, and local, but it has words in there, local, state or federal with certain responsibilities. So every state, every locality, and the federal government has this one constitution. It's living by this one. Okay, if it gets accepted, that is. The state parent sector board must determine the authorities and responsibilities of all the sectors, other than sectors 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Those are the foreign policy sectors, the military and the like. Those deal with the foreign policy. So the federal government will deal with that. Everything else the state parent sector boards will deal with. So I have a full system on that. I've thought it through. I believe it's sufficient to make everything happen the way it should happen. But look at those clauses, and this is kind of taken out of context. You need to read that full section in there to fully understand what we're dealing with here. Okay, this deals with negative externalities if different states separate the sectors a little bit differently than other states, and it causes a problem. It shouldn't cause a lot of problems, but if it starts creating negative externalities, then the members of the state level rating systems, the rating system is the same as the sector board, if you know the structure, and it gives them different powers to make it more consistent across all the states. Again, if this is the first video, this is a little bit out of context. I'm trying to stick with the parent sector board and what their authority is. Sector boards and parent sector boards within the full CRA structure may not address religion. So you can have religion within CRAs. You can not have religion within CRAs. See, every CRA chooses how they want to be governed. Whether they want to be governed with a little bit, with a lot of it, however they want to do it. So religion is not forbidden within competitive regulatory agencies, how you want to be governed. Now, I doubt many people want to be governed through the church. I doubt it. Even I go to church, but I still don't want to be governed through them to any degree. Maybe I want to take some principles or have a mild amount. I don't know what the CRAs are going to do. But I want that experimentation, and then be able to choose who I want to be governed by. And in some areas, family law, maybe I want some of that philosophy to be more included. Police, maybe not. I don't know. We'll have to see how every sector will do it. Okay, let me read this full one though. The sector board and the parent sector board within the full CRA structure may not address religion. This includes regulating, limiting, promoting, funding, diminishing, inhibiting, all broadly defined. So I don't want anybody to read this and be able to say, well, you can do this or you can't do that. No, I'm making it all inclusive, broadly defined. The sector boards cannot deal with religion by negatively or positively, inhibiting or limiting or promoting or funding. Not the sector board level. CRAs, yes. Sector board, parent sector board, no. And there's nothing in this Constitution that even gives the parent sector board any thought that they could in the first place. But just like any Constitution, it gets warped, and I want clauses to really stop them from doing anything in the going in areas they shouldn't go to. The declaration of war escrow account. So 20% of the money, about 1% of GDP, 20% of the money going to the military, which is 1% of GDP, will have to be going to a war escrow account. So we build up funds. So if we go to war, we don't have to raise taxes and go into debt. We want an escrow account in there. It has to be freed up by the parent sector board if there's a sizable military action. And this one is only if there's approaching America soil or on American soil. And it has to be renewed every 30 days and only 50%. Now, if we have to go to war across the ocean or across outside of our borders, outside of American borders, then the diplomatic foreign policy sector has to vote. And it's a 70% vote. So we're not going to go to war unless we really need to. So Afghanistan probably could have, back in 2001, we would probably 70% probably would have passed that. We would have made that threshold. Iraq back in 2003, I believe it was, probably not. I forget exactly what the percentage was, but we probably would not have made it to Iraq, but made it to Afghanistan. This video is not on whether we should have done it one way or the other. I'm just saying 70% is going to be hard to get to, but if we're attacked, we can go to war. The Federal Parent Sector Board has the authority to increase the GDP tax percentage regarding a sizable military action. Again, hopefully this is never going to come into play. We're not going to be going to war. We're going to have a 5% of GDP is a lot to fund the military. And anybody seeing that much money funding that much military might and the free enterprise system making our military much stronger, much more formidable, we're just not going to have too many people trying us out. Okay, all cases fall under the sector's jurisdiction as described in their sector's purpose and mission statement. The Parent Sector Board's legislative branch has the final determination. So again, we're going to the separation between the sectors. The Parent Sector Board's judicial branch will have an appellate court strictly dealing with sector jurisdiction. So if a case is making it through the court system and something gets appealed up, on the side you can appeal up to the Parent Sector Board judicial branch a case dealing with, hey, this went outside of this sector's jurisdiction. Just so everybody's staying within their boundaries. Because every sector is going to have its own judicial branch. Any variance with this standard transition, again, this slide's a little bit out of place, I'm sorry. This is a standard transition from debt repayment, how we sell off government assets from land to school buildings to aircraft carriers to roads to everything. Any variance of this standard transition requires a 70% Parent Sector Board representative vote. So we want to stay within the standards. It's the good standards. And if I did not make a great standard here, which I think I did, then we can solve this before it even goes into this amendment. We don't want we don't want a 1,000-page paper on this. We want very simple 5 or 6 paragraphs at the most, and that's what I have. Okay, this is the structure again. We're almost done with this video. We're dealing with the Parent Sector Board, but since we've gone over this, we want to deal with this one more time. 30 sectors here will, here and here, these are the 30 sectors. Under each one is about 12 CRAs. These are the ones that you pick. So you send representatives from here up to here to the sector board. Then all 30 sends all 30 sectors with 12 in each one. So what is that? About 400 different CRAs sending people up to representatives up to the Parent Sector Board. So it's a significant number. That's why you can share some, because a lot of people are going to be similarly minded and they're constitutionally minded. That's what the main job of a Parent Sector Board representative, legislative, executive, judicial, is separation of power, separation of power, separation of power. And we do give them a few checks and balances. If something big happens, release some money to go to the military. If something big happens, 65% can have a change the Constitution briefly to deal with that externality. So the Parent Sector Board is not going to have a lot of power, but they're still extremely important in this by keeping the full structure going. They need to make sure every sector board is doing its job. They need to make sure all the ratings agencies are doing their job. They are overseeing, but they don't have the power to regulate, but they have the power to say, you're not following the Constitution. You need to get back in line with the Constitution. And every rating agency or every CRA has the standing, the ability to go to court and go to the parent sector board and say, the Constitution is not being followed. What do you say, parent sector board? And force them to make a decision. Right now, the Supreme Court only takes the cases they want to take. And a lot of people cannot get standing. A lot of people do not have representation to get that standing. But every CRA and every RA, being at least 5% of the American people, or at least the locality or the state, or 5% of those, that's big enough to say, hey, we have the standing to say you're going against the Constitution. You need to get in line. And at least ask the parent sector board's judicial branch to make a decision. Hey, is this true or is it not true? Are they going outside the Constitution? Are they going outside their sector or whatever? Now, the sector boards will have some of this authority too. We're going to have to separate parent sector board authority and sector board authority, and some will be a little bit of a gray area. And where that lands, I'm not sure yet. Once more people look at this whole video, we'll come to see. Let's go down here. Here are the 30 sectors. Let's go through it real quick. 5 in the charity system, because we get rid of all welfare. 5 in the foreign protection system. Look at that video. 5 in the violent crime mitigation system. Again, everything here going to the free enterprise system, or competitive governing at least. If you want to stay with government doing it for you, that's fine. You pick a CRA where the government's doing it for you. If you want to pick a CRA where the government's just doing a little bit of regulation and you private sector companies doing it for you, that's good too. You get to be governed by how you want to be governed. But signing a CRA social contract, to be an American, to be a member of a citizen of your state, a citizen of your locality, means that you have to pay the fees or join a CRA and an RA in every single sector of all 3 levels of government. So you're represented, you have to pay your fees. So a citizen is hugely beneficial to a citizen to be a citizen of the United States, especially under this new Constitution. But a citizen has responsibilities, obligations. With that obligation comes bigger benefits. So you have to agree to be in this country. But we're going to give you the maximum amount of liberty. And the only time we take away a little bit of liberty is strictly to deal with negative externalities. Because your group or your transaction or your actions are harming other people in society. And it's large enough to say government needs to stop it. Okay, let's see. Here are the last 15. So you see how we separate it, and every one of those have top level leaders. So the parent sector board can never tell the leader of the financial banking sector, for example, how to do their business, or the insurance company, insurance how to do their business. They get to control it. They just decide that insurance regulations stop here and financial regulations begin there. Environmental regulations begin here and land and water starts over here. That's how they separate it. You can see how environmental, transportation, and land and water will kind of overlap a little bit. The parent sector board will define those lines. Okay, everything's so easy to find on Haley2024.org. Please consider a donation to this Haley 2024 The Movement. And look at the other videos, but this was strictly on the parent sector board. Even though I went kind of in depth, I really touched on a lot of areas where you really need to watch those videos, from debt to taxes to transitions and the whole like. But the parent sector board has important responsibilities, but not governing responsibilities where they regulate. They don't have regulation responsibilities. Anyway, until the next video.